another episode of A Moment of Tiki, coming to you from the Lagoon of Mystery, my home tiki bar here in Central Texas. This episode is kind of a big deal for me. Over the years, if you folks have been watching along from the beginning or even, halfway through or whatever, you know that I have been trying to improve my carving skill set. Well, in today's episode, I take on my biggest project yet, using chainsaw, using die grinder, using angle grinder, using even some hand tools. It's kind of overwhelming. It was. It's also, an older piece. I was overwhelmed by how much footage I had and wasn't really sure how to put it together until now. Flashback to February of 2021, when you may have heard Texas had a massive Arctic blast that just devastated the state. It was the coldest in my lifetime. It got down to 9 degrees Fahrenheit here, which is minus 10 Celsius, something like that, or perhaps even more. It's gotten that cold here before, but this time it got cold and it stayed cold. It stayed that far below freezing for several days on end. Usually we'll get a hard cold snap and within a day or two the temperatures will be back above freezing. That didn't happen this time. The end result of that is that we had a 30-foot tall Mexican fan palm in the front of our house that was killed. Could not survive the cold. My inclination, after it was clear this tree was not going to recover, was to cut it down and try to carve some type of tiki out of it. My wife is the one who stepped up with the idea, why cut it down? Why not leave it in place and carve it into a tiki where it stands? And it's like, oh, this is an interesting idea. It was challenging. I certainly couldn't carve a 30-foot tall tree. I've never carved anything this big or ambitious before, but I was willing to give it a shot. And so if you come with me, we'll flash back for a couple of years ago and see how this all unfolded. Before I start carving this dead Mexican fan palm, I need to remove all the boot jacks, the leftover remains of the palm fronds, and the trunk. Basically skin the bark off the trunk to get to the harder wood underneath. To do that, I'm going to use a chainsaw. I have a Makita battery-powered chainsaw, which has worked very well for this sort of thing. Now, because the tree is tall, I'm gonna have to get up high to use the chainsaw to skin it. And, anytime you're using a chainsaw, you need to be extremely careful because these things can be exceptionally dangerous if used carelessly. I'm using a scaffolding right here that'll get me the elevation needed. You can use a ladder. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. That's a lot less stable, more awkward positions. And when you're using a chainsaw, I always wear gloves, eye protection. Eye protection is extremely important, and a respirator mask. Now, I am not comfortable cutting this tiki freehand. I certainly don't want it looking all lopsided. So I have sketched out a rough design, what I want. I'm trying to not be specifically Hawaiian in style or Maori or Cook Island or Marquesan or anything. I'm taking some elements from other Polynesian tropical cultures, but I'm trying to make this distinct in and of itself. So one of the things I'm doing at the top is having a crown that's roughly 3 feet tall and triangular. 3 feet, that's roughly a meter for you European and rest of the world viewers. So to keep that from being lopsided, I'm going to take this butcher paper. So holding the pattern in place, take a Sharpie marker and trace along the edge, get the pattern and guidelines on the tree. Could have picked a less windy day. That would have helped a lot. Now I have finished cutting the outer layer of bark off the palm trunk and roughing out the crown. So I'm putting away the chainsaw, which is good. I wasn't comfortable with it, and chainsaws are always dangerous. So I'm happy to move away from using the chainsaw and getting some power tools that I'm a little bit more comfortable with. Alas, best laid plans and all that, I had intended to do a lot of the work on palm trunk with this angle grinder using this extreme cuts-all disc. It's a shaping wheel and it can really hog out the material. I used it a lot on the pecan moai that I did, and it handled the really tough pecan wood fairly well. But I quickly found out that this palm is a lot more fibrous than previous palm logs I've worked with, and admittedly I haven't worked with that many, but when I took the angle grinder with the carving wheel to it, it just fuzzed up. It became a hairy mess, impossible to really see, difficult to get any kind of detail out of. So, you know, reluctantly, I'm gonna have to put the angle grinder aside. Instead of the angle grinder, I'm going to use a die grinder to get in there. The die grinder, think of it as a giant supersized Dremel. It uses rotary cutting burrs on the end to really get in there in a narrow space and hog out the material. I have 2 different burrs that I'm using for this stage. I have several others that I might use later, but for right now, I've got this narrow tapered burr from Cuts-All that is fairly good for detail work on a project of this size, and I've got this 2-inch, half an inch wide ball nose burr from Sabertooth, which I'm really enjoying. It's enabling me to get in there and work out some of the rough shapes in a good fashion, and it's proven really effective and very efficient. So between these two, I think I'm going to be able to get most of the detail taken care of on this next stage. I have never used spirals in any of my carving work before, so I thought this might be a good time to start using it. Try it to do some detail in the crown design. So I'm using Sharpie marker and just sketching out the rough spiral lines. Doesn't have to be too detailed. just to guide where my cuts are going to go. As I mentioned earlier, this palm is very fibrous, and you can see the cuts are leaving a very fuzzy, hairy edge, which, you know, I don't really want. So the way we're going to handle that is to apply a torch to it. The torch singes away all those fibers, all those hairs, without catching the actual wood on fire, because the wood's too dense to catch easily, and cleans it up real nicely and gives it a nice aged patina. As I said before, I am not freehanding this. I'm just not making it up as I go along. I don't trust myself enough for it. So before I start carving in the face here, I'm going to draw a center line down the middle so I can keep the tiki carving symmetrical and don't end up with something that's crazy lopsided. So I'm not measuring this out, I'm just eyeballing it at this point and just pulling straight down. And again, don't worry about the Sharpie marker, because it's all going to ground away and sanded away, so you'll never see it once everything's finished. Nothing drives me more buggy than misshapen eyes on things that I carve. So I've taken some butcher paper and cut out a template right here, measured out a rough positioning, and have this here. So I'm going to use my Sharpie and sketch in rough location of the eye. And this will guide me as I cut. For this guy's mouth, I'm gonna have teeth going all the way around. So from the lips, I need to carve out, remove about a 3/4 inch section to get it flush, and then I'm gonna start carving in the teeth because the teeth aren't flush with the gums. So to accomplish that, I'm going to use this saber-tooth barrel burr. This, unlike most other burrs, this is one of the few I've found that actually has a rounded end with cutting bits on the surface. And what this allows me to do, the rounded part, it allows me to make flat cuts and feather them together. If you just have a sharp angle on there, it can result in little scalloped cut marks. But with the rounded bit, I'm able to feather it out more so it's a smoother and more even cut. And I like that. And before I cut into the mouth, or the teeth actually, I'm using black Sharpie to draw in the outline, give me a good guide where my cuts are going. Okay, we can't forget to put in our guy's ear. We have a nice amount of blank space right here, and I don't want to forget that, because all the best tikis have ears. So as you can see, I have used the butcher paper once again to cut out a template. And just roughly sketching the outline in here with the black Sharpie. Now I want to draw in some detail. So, not terribly detailed, but I'm using the Sharpie. Draw a circle here and a circle here on each lobe. Guide, and then an S curve looping the two. So this is just a guide. It doesn't have to be perfect or exact. Just giving me a rough guide so I can track the cutter. And for the circles and the lobes, I'm using the bigger, more aggressive ball nose cutter, and then when I come back into this, I'm going to use one of the more narrow, fine detail cutters. And now I use the torch to burn away the fuzz so I can see what I've done. It's not bad at all. All right. This is the latest part in this carve that I'm worried about. I've been progressively panicked and worried about each stage, concerned that I'm gonna mess it up. But this is new for me because I've never carved a body before. So the first step is getting some arms, and I want the arms to be roughly symmetrical. So I cut out, using the butcher paper, a rough outline. And with that, I'm going to attempt to sketch it out over here to give myself a pattern to follow along. And on the opposite side, I'm just going to flip it over and repeat. So. Okay. That looks like it is as good a template guideline as I'm gonna get, so fingers crossed. I am looking to try and finish out the legs here and do the knees. And what I want to do is taper the lower leg a little bit. It's a little flared here at the bottom. So taking the pin and marking roughly where the knees are at this level. I'm learning that I don't love using the chainsaw to carve. I much prefer the angle grinder and the die grinder, but for this I want to take out a triangular sliver, and so that's calls for the chainsaw. The chainsaw removes a lot of material very quickly. It doesn't give you much control, but that's what I'm going to do. Try and take a little wedge out of each side, and we'll see what happens. So I'm going to use the chainsaw to cut a V in here so we can get some inward taper in the legs. And as soon as that's done, I'm gonna break out the angle grinder and smooth all of this out. One thing that is amazing to me is this tree froze to death in February of 2021. And here it is July of 2023, more than 2 years later. And this tree is just soaking wet inside. This is after a year of being topped off at the top, having most of the bark stripped away and various carvings done. The wood is just retaining a lot of water, and you would have thought that it would have evaporated out or dried out. And there are some sections that are very dry and brittle, but once I get past the first inch or so of wood, the core, it's wet. This whole section, everything I cut today, just sopping wet. Clumping sawdust. Crazy. Never would have expected that. Certainly not with wood this fibrous and not dense. It's not dense at all. Now I'm going to do some touch-ups and some final details in here, and I am using the Cuts-All taper bit. It's a fine taper bit on my die grinder. Gives me a lot of control and the ability to do more narrow channels than these ball nose that I have been using. Now that I have finally finished all the primary carving, I am going to go over all the fresh carving with a blowtorch to get all the fuzz burned away and get some contrast definition going where the joints and seams are. Because some sections of this tree are so dry, I got this water bottle here to spritz it in case any of the sections I'm torching doesn't want to go out. Pays to be safe. Everything deeper inside, it's still moist. That's not going to be an issue, but on the surface, burning could be a problem. Okay, on the back side of the legs, you can see where I have some dry rot in here. The wood itself is very fibrous, more so than other places. It's very, very punky, just not great, and that's a wonderful vector for insects to infiltrate. So I'm going to use some insecticidal foam that's designed for use against termites or carpenter ants or other stuff, and I'm sticking it in here with the hollows, trying to make this as inhospitable for any insects who want to come and take up residency as possible. This semi-rotted, punky, hollowed out section continues to cause concern for me. I don't know how long this is going to survive, but it'll survive a lot less amount of time if that rot continues. So what I am going to do is take this wood hardener, it's resinous epoxy, and I am going to apply it all on this soft area. I used this with the degraded pecan wood on my moai before and had decent results with it. So I'm hoping that applying this to this wood, this degrading and decayed wood, this punky stuff, will have a positive effect. Strengthen it, give it a little more resistance to weather, to rot, to insects. This could be a complete and total waste of time, but I have it, so might as well. We'll know within a couple of years if it's helped or not. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you see, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. If you really like what you've been seeing here on A Moment of Tiki, please leave a comment or maybe even share the video to your feeds. What this does is make it easier for others to find A Moment of Tiki. And if you do that, I will be grateful. Mahalo. We are entering into the home stretch now. The carving is complete, so I am applying a generous coat of Cabot's Australian timber oil. This is an oil polyurethane blend. It protects against rain and humidity and UV, and I am hoping that it will provide some degree of protection, penetrating protection for my tiki here. Because, as I've mentioned several times, this Mexican fan palm wood is not very dense, and I have very little faith that it is going to prove weather resistant and durable in its non-living state. So I'm hoping that this finish will prove to extend its lifespan. I have used other finishes on other parts of my Tiki lounge and have been disappointed when they do not live up to the longevity promised on their packaging. I've used several different types, and it just died after a year essentially. So hopefully this oil will penetrate to offer some protection, and the little bit of spar urethane in it will offer some surface protection as well. Best of both worlds, maybe. We'll see. And here we are with the finished Tiki. He ended up being 11 feet tall, including the crown on top. It was a lot of work. It took me about 6 months to finish the carve, but that wasn't entirely that time wasn't entirely spent carving. I carved for an hour a day for a couple of weeks. Weather started getting bad, rainy, cold. I laid off for several months. I came back, did a little bit more off and on. So how long it really took, I don't know, but I started and I finished, and it was a span of about 6 months. I'm really happy with him. I learned a lot. Hopefully I will be able to apply what I learned on future carves, and he has been happily guarding and welcoming folks to the front of our house for the past year, and hopefully he will be welcoming people for many years to come. So the death of our Mexican fan palm tree resulted in the birth of a massive Tiki in my front yard. I'm really proud of him. He turned out better than I expected, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more big, impressive Tiki carves to come. So until next time, from the Lagoon of Mystery, aloha.
Well, if you ever feel lonely and you haven't got a friend, you feel downhearted and that, you rope in and to get yourself together and head for a place I know. It's a little German town with a Spanish name, and once you go there, you never be the same, and it's a whole lot cleaner and safer than Mexico. Well, it's 90 miles from Houston, 120 from San Antonio, and once you hit the city limits, you don't have to be alone. Every tavern salesman that's on the road, every trucker that's scared and overload knows a boom in a little bird they call a grain. If your ever loving woman won't treat you right, and your nights get longer and your pants get tight, then get yourself moving and get ready for a change. Some fella said country town they call Lagoon. Well, it's 90 miles from Houston, 120 from San Antonio. And once you hit the city limits, you don't have to be alone. Every traveling salesman's on the road, every trucker that's carrying an overload knows a blooming little bird they call Lagoon. So if you got a little money and you feel uptight, go to LaGrange and they'll treat you right. Just stop at the filling station, give them half a chance. And they'll give you directions to a little retreat with a grade A government inspected meat, and they'll send you to the famous chicken ranch. Well, it's 90 miles from Houston, 120 from San Antonio. And once you hit the city limits, you don't have to be alone. Every traveling salesman that's on the road, every trucker that's carrying overload knows a blooming little bird they call Lagoon. Every traveling salesman that's on the road, every trucker that's carrying overload knows a blooming little bird they call Lagoon. Thank you.
Honey, that is a little country place out there. The people's tried to make it into something that it wasn't. Just a little country whore, that's what it amounted to.